village voyagers. Welcome back to Musicland Stories, the origin point for all music and adventure stories in the known universe, and some of the unknown ones. And we're here at the Musicland Concert Hall. Last season, I became the captain, but you probably remember my real name, the Conductor. Yes, I do love a funky new outfit and playing different roles as I take you on new adventures. It's like when you want to wear your favorite Halloween costume to school and mom and dad say you can't. But anywho, I hope you haven't forgotten about me, because I'm here to take you into the heart of the jungle with a friend of mine. Her name is Guanina. She has a huge round mess of red curls around her face, which makes her look like a flame tree in bloom. She's all energy and unruly motion. She simply can't stand still, her legs seeming to dance to one beat, her arms to another. Guanina lived in a village in the valley that sat at the foot of the great mountain. The mountain was covered by a lush rainforest, where rain would fall upon the leaves and drip down onto the ground. The tiny drops of water mixed and mingled to form the great big rivers that made their way down the mountain and gave life to all the tiny villages along their winding paths. The people that lived in Guanina's village lived normal, happy lives and went about their days as you probably do. Waking up, washing up, eating up, getting down to business. Whatever that might be, working for the adults, learning for the kids, and then winding down and going to bed. But there was one thing missing. One thing that you probably take for granted. Music. There was no music. Well, I shouldn't say no music. There was one guy. He asked everyone to call him the flute master. I'll tell you why in a bit. And he did have an instrument, an old flute. And he did play some old music on his old flute. The thing is, there was just one flute master, and there were a whole lot of little villages. So the flute master made one yearly visit for 1 week to each village in the valley. And that was the happiest week of the whole year for those lucky villagers. Because that week, there was music. And there was no getting down to business. The whole week was one long holiday. And the only thing anyone wanted to do when the flute master came to town was boogie. Now, this did complicate things for the villagers. You can't very well celebrate a birthday without music, or a wedding, or a karaoke night. That was pretty obvious. So for the 7 days of the week the flute master was in town, no one slept. Again, I may be exaggerating, but not by much. The villagers would pack a whole year's worth of celebrations into one crazy week of singing and dancing. By now, you may be asking yourself, what's up with these village people? How can anyone stop the music? I wondered that myself when I heard about this place. And I soon figured out it all came down to the flute master. So let me tell you about him. He's this crotchety old bald guy who carries around a flute in a little purse that he wears around his neck and behind his long flowing beard. He gotten the flute from his father, and his father had gotten it from his father, and that guy from his father, and, well, you can guess where this is going. And the flute master hadn't just inherited the flute. He'd also inherited the title flute master and 12 old songs that he'd play and a bunch of old stories that he'd tell people. The stories were about how he'd gotten the flute and learned the few songs he knew how to play. The villagers were content, if not entirely happy, with how things were, because that is how things had always been. At least, that's what the flute master would say when he'd inevitably retell the story of the first flute. Before there was music, he'd start with a deep and very serious-sounding voice. A wandering woodpecker pecked at a twig on a tree that grew out of the side of the great mountain. He pecked 6 holes in that twig and created the flute. A young boy from the valley found the flute and brought music to us. But the mountain grew angry and walled itself off behind a dense jungle full of spiders and other beasts, so that no one would return. The townspeople had heard this all before. Still, their skin crawled, as if hearing it for the first time. Crossing into the dark jungle was unthinkable. The flute master went on. As the years passed, the boy became skilled with the flute, and he composed the 12 songs. Oh yeah, maybe you didn't catch this earlier, but the old songs he played, there were only 12 of them. 12. That's not exactly a whole lot of variety. He continued. That flute and those songs have been passed down from that boy, the first flute master, to the next, until this most beloved of our traditions fell to me. Well, you get the idea. He'd go on and on about how great he was for a good long while. In any case, just as the flute master was about to triumphantly raise the one flute above his head, that was the big finale to his long, boring speech. Guanina kinda lost it. It started down by her toes, a twitch, and it crept up to her knees, and suddenly they were bending and her whole body was bobbing up and down. Then her arms got into it, and they were flailing all over the place. Finally, it reached her throat, and she started to whistle. Of course, Guanina didn't know it was called whistling. No one knew it was called whistling. Guanina had just spontaneously invented whistling. She was playing music by blowing air through her lips. No instrument required. Guanina had made such a commotion that the flute master had stopped mid-sentence and looked out over the hushed crowd and straight into Guanina's eyes. Somehow, she knew she had done something wrong. There was one flute. There was one guy who played that flute. And there were 12 songs that the one guy played on the one flute. That's it. Tradition is tradition. It's how things had always been and how they would always be. Guanina ran back home, tears in her eyes. That year, she was so embarrassed that she set out all the other celebrations during the week the flute master was in her village. So this year, she had promised her mom and herself that she'd definitely be on her best behavior. She was absolutely not going to miss out on such an important event in the life of every little girl and boy. And yet, when the day came for the flute master's arrival, the townspeople had gathered in the village square, as they always did, on the appointed day, at the appointed time. But there was no flute master. He just didn't show up. Instead, a young woman in a purple cape covered in silver glitter with dark black hair and bright yellow eyes made her way to the very center of the town square. She did not speak for some time, instead seeming to look for someone with her piercing gaze. Finally, her eyes set upon Guanina, and like the year before, Guanina immediately knew she was in trouble. She started to make a run for it, back home. But just as she was about to make it out of the crowd, the mysterious woman opened her mouth and her voice, crystal clear and pure, boomed out, "Guanina!" Stopped in her tracks, Guanina turned around. The crowd parted, creating a straight path between the young woman and the young girl. "Guanina," she said, "the flute master will no longer journey to the villages of the valley at the foot of the great mountain. You broke with tradition." "I didn't mean to," said Guanina in a whisper. "I know, my child, but it falls to you to make this right. You must again bring music to the peoples of the valley." "It's up to me?" "Yes. You must venture into the great rainforest that covers the mountain and come back with music." "A new flute?" asked Guanina. Trying to hide the slightest hint of a mischievous smile on her face, the young woman replied, "That will be up to you. I can say no more." And with that, she turned around in a snap, a cloud of silver glitter billowing around her, and left the village. Guanina turned to her mom. She gave her that look of understanding that moms are known for the world over, and simply nodded. Guanina gave her a kiss on the cheek and a big hug. She prepared to leave for the deep, dark jungle that the people of the valley had not dared step into since the first flute master had emerged from it with the treasured woodpecker flute. She was eager and excited to see what she might discover. Deep down, Guanina had always known that there had to be more music in the world. And now, in her search for a new flute, she'd have a chance to find out if her hunch was right. But she did have a whole bunch of unanswered questions. I mean, this whole thing was kind of crazy. Had her outburst really offended the flute master so much that he had decided to quit his lifelong musical touring? Touchy, that one. Also, why was she the one who had to go find a new flute? And what about her mom? She was pretty quick to let her go into a deep, dark jungle that her people had stayed away from for who knows how many years. Oh yeah, and what about this mysterious woman with the glittery purple cape and yellow eyes? Who was she? Well, I can answer that one. You see, you might say I have a hand in this story. The mysterious woman is me, the conductor. Except here, when I travel with Guanina into the jungle, she'll know me as the charmer. She doesn't know that yet, so you all are in on a big secret, and I need you to keep it. Because if Guanina is going to bring new music and new life to her people, she needs to find it on her own. Together, you and I will help her out. A nudge here, a little magical glitter there, a helpful tip whispered into the wind, and maybe a couple of portal jumps too. You'll see. But for now, Guanina needs to start this adventure into the jungle all on her own. And if you follow along with me, I'll tell you what she finds and what makes Guanina so very, very special. Until next time, my village voyagers, this is your conductor. Charmer. Out! Musicland Stories is a collaboration between Starglow Media and Double Elvis. Executive producers from Double Elvis are Jake Brennan and Brady Sadler. Executive producers from Starglow Media are Jed Baker and Agrenish A. Palmer. This episode of Musicland Stories was written by Armando Valdez Prieto. Alessandro Santoro is our showrunner. Narration by me, Nikki Lynette. Original score by Jonathan Warman. Story editing by Zeph Lundy. An episode mix by Colin Fleming. Grown-ups, you can find more ad-free audio fun for the whole family by subscribing to Starglow Plus on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts.